changing. James Baldwin said, "The perspective changes only with the journey." Some things change, but there is also repetition and continuity. Some changes are cyclical, like the seasons, or erosion and deposition on a longer geological timescale. Others may be forever. Some changes are reversible. Others, like my aging, are not. I mostly take close-ups, focusing in on a specific detail, which is repeated on a larger scale in the landscape. They're often patterns that are formed by processes, for example, branching patterns. And every page, I suppose, is a moment of time in my life. In 2012, I began to work in papier-mâché. When I left my post as a head teacher, I had leadership and management books to dispose of, and their transformation into new things represented a transformation in my life. I've continued to work with papier-mâché. These are figures I made to show me looking closely and thinking on a walk. I left patches of text showing. Materials are very important to me, and making is a way of thinking. And I like papier-mâché because it values rubbish. The changes from fluid to solid are like geological changes involving transformation. It's domestic in scale and not usually very permanent. Using a meaning-laden material shows how we walk through a cultural as well as a physical landscape. We are all made of text. So I began to make a line of paper bowls as a form of diary and sketchbook in order to research ideas about change and time through making. There is one for each day of the year, although it's taken me more than a year to complete. We only ever live in the moment, but that moment is linked to past and future moments. So traveling through time is not straightforward. There are piercings and folds. The bowls, unlike the pages of a book, can be selected and rearranged to show the links and patterns. They show different kinds of change and relationship to the environment. Some are seasonal. I made these at the time of the beast from the east. Often my thinking is changed by art and the things I see. So this was from a building in Glasgow, the roof of a building in Glasgow, and from an Eleanor Wood piece with the piercings and the idea of the two sides. Some changes are about erosion and loss. So the rusting staples were copied from posters stapled up in the city. And the writing is from my father's diaries, who's now gone. There are daily traces, the detritus of my autobiography. There's catastrophe. These are the names of storms. Since I've been making the bowls, there have been great changes in me, really. I'm aware of change. I was aware at the beginning of change, and bowls are sort of an attempt to maintain equilibrium because of the bowl shape and keeping the surface level. But change during that time has become more and more intense, more and more complete, more and more catastrophic and irreversible. In Letters to Commando, I was also going to say that in making these, I often pick up pieces of rubbish from the gutter, and I noticed that people observe me completely differently when I'm picking up bits. It seems as if people think I've crossed a boundary into the unacceptable. In Letters to Commando, Edmund de Waal writes that Walter Benjamin gets lost easily in cities and in text. He compares himself to a rag picker, one eye in the gutter to find the rejected and the overlooked. Rag pickers are not fast. There is some pleasure in this, he says, an art to getting lost. I began to see the line of walking through places and through time as a line of thinking, a line of text. the line of my being. I'm fascinated by the way maps represent the landscape in various ways and also reflect the culture and intentions of those who make them. The lines of text in these maps are made up of snapshots in words which follow the path I took. Repeated routes are overlaid so that they show the similarities and differences in the landscape and in me as observer from one occasion to another. The context and apparently objective certainty of a map are removed. It was on a walk with friends that Keats understood something that seems important. Several things dovetailed in my mind, and at once it struck me what quality went to form a man of achievements. I mean negative capability. That is, when a man is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. I carried an OS map, but I didn't generally know where I was going, only where I was. In Waterlog, Roger Deakins says, I was using the map in fact, not to find my way, but to get lost, to lose myself in the landscape. I might have been trying to find myself in the landscape. Photography is often spoken about in terms of capture. As well as taking photographs, I used to pick up and collect items on my walks, things I wanted to capture and keep. There is something about recording, which is not just study and reflection, but also an attempt to hold on to things. I have now begun to release my collection of objects back into the wild. However, I draw each often several times before replacing it, so it's quite a slow process. Drawing is an important way of looking, leading to ideas about change and connection. I hadn't, however, expected the number of questions that arose about where things belong, the sorts of responsibilities that are exposed by these small actions of replacement. Even more questions about responsibility are raised by actions such as pouring tar down a hillside, as Robert Smithson did, even making a track in the dewy grass, as in Richard Long's seminal photo, is some sort of imposition about leaving a trace. I made 12 square pieces of papier-mâché like the pages of a book, like photographs and based on photographs, to show moments in time on my line of walking and living. I wanted to explore how we could walk in line with the forces of the natural world. I was aiming to show lines in the landscape caused by process, rather than straight lines imposed on the earth, like the colonial boundaries drawn in Africa. A line continues through them all. They were placed around Salthouse Church so that the visitors to the exhibition walked along the trail that I had, or a map of that trail, in Smithson's terms, a non-site installation. Mona Hatoum said, I wanted to implicate the viewer in a phenomenological situation in which the experience is physical and direct. I was interested in others following the track and in connections between people walking separately and at different times, but along a similar path. It's amazing to see how our footprints in the sand on the beach compare with those found at Haysborough from so long ago. This one is based on the patterns in the skin of flint, much enlarged and fractally similar to patterns in the marshes, with lines caused by erosion over a huge length of time. This is based on the moving skin of the River Nar, with lines caused by flow and reflection. I have a somewhat ambivalent relationship with text, and I made this piece an annoyance at the learning objective speak overtaking my MA course. Pulling the semi-pulped wet text apart made creek-like patterns. More recently, I made a concertina booklet using photographs of these Salthouse pieces. This makes it possible to follow the line by turning the pages, but also by folding differently to see the moments in different combinations. Reading through a book, is much like living through time. The batiks in the Fox's Beck booklet are made with ivy berries and oak galls, collected from the site. They reflect on the flow of time, captured in frozen moments, and on connections with others who have used the stream for a range of purposes in the past. It used to be used for water for animals and steam engines. Now it's part of a conservation area. The framed piece shows the stills from the flow in a different way. Every line is a line segment. I'm currently making a memoir using fabrics and other items that I've kept from my past or inherited from my parents. Each piece will be like a page in a large format book. A line of stitching is the line of my life running across them. In this Go with the Flow booklet, which I made over the winter, originally with the intention of experimenting with stitches for the memoir project, I became absorbed in the process of considering line, listening to music as I stitched, indoors and introverted, but nevertheless, some sense of being the moment and following a thread through time. These pieces were made for a sculpture trail. I'd been thinking about shared paths, trails and not trails, stations on a route, blocked paths, integration and camouflage. I'm interested in the idea of people walking the same path at different times and with different perceptions, and in artworks as a response to sites. But I feel quite ambivalent about art imposing on sites. The numbered positions on the sculpture trail remind me of pages in a book, but people can take different routes. The following 3 studies of water surfaces were made for an exhibition with the title Hinterland. They record and recreate places I've seen and photographed on my walks. They are about the surfaces of water, reflecting and concealing. My line of walking takes me through spaces that are outside me and inside me. Anne Hardy, a contemporary installation artist, making spaces the viewer can enter, says that places can be both strange and familiar, floating between the real and imaginary. This one, The Shrieking Pit, is near Side Strand and is probably an old ironworking. The legend attached to it is about a young woman who drowned herself. I wanted to show the dark depths. The hanging is a record of what I actually saw, but I also sought to make it unfamiliar, to suggest story. The Penguin Pool at London Zoo is a superb and listed modernist building, but not good for penguins, so they now have a new pool. This one is the surface of the old pool, the skin of the water, but you can see through. The River Nar piece is about flow. As Heraclitus said, no man ever steps into the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man. There isn't really a conclusion to this work, except in the pieces themselves. It wasn't about walking to a destination. Every line is only a line segment. Paul Rickworth said, metaphoric language provides knowledge, but in a way that makes us arrive at it through the work of interpretation. So my conclusion might be that I don't know, but I bear witness. So this is the writing for these bowls with me at the center, or the end or the beginning. And those are the books that I mostly used.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Ruth. That was amazing. I loved getting to see all your beautiful work. So thank you so much for sharing that with us all. I'm going to save questions until we can ask all three speakers, but somebody did ask which area you're in, which seems pertinent, so they can get some context for where your line has been going.
I'm in North Norfolk, so the coast that I walk is near Cromer.
Wonderful. And you've got lots of lovely, fascinating, beautiful, thank you, comments in the chat that you can have a look at if you'd like to. I am recording this for those of you that wanted to know that. The recording seemed to kick in just slightly after we'd actually started talking, but only slightly. So we did get almost all of that, which is good. Our technology, don't you just love it? So we're going to move from Ruth to Chiara, who's going to be sharing with us her talk As Far as the Eye Can Travel.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Ruth, for a really beautiful talk. And there's many points of resonance with my project, and I think they'll be pretty clear. But I was very taken by what you said about returning things. This tension and relationship between capturing and returning. It's something that is very, very central to the way I'm thinking about this project in particular. I'm going to share my screen with you. Just for a little bit of context, I'm a filmmaker, and about 8 years ago or so, 10 years ago, I started working at London's Bookart bookshop, my friend's bookshop in Pitfield Street, which specializes in artist books. And that sort of opened up a whole other universe for me in terms of medium. My background is in photography, and I've been making films for the last 15 so years, and the book gave me a way to return as a format to photography, and this is what I'll be talking about, a project that was born 6 years ago called As Far as the Eye Can Travel. Can you all see that? Yeah. Slideshow. You can see that, yeah? Yeah. So this is a little introduction to the project. So As Far as the Eye Can Travel is a paper Wunderkammer that gathers together geographies of the mind, topographies of the soul, and physical excavations that could be chance encounters, moments of discovery, very small ones, unexpected revelation, moments of surprise, enchantment, that make your imagination take flight. And at the same time, it's a magnifying glass. It's a way of looking at the world with care and commitment to reveal all the unexplained resonances and magic that emerge from our daily encounters with it. The zines are published monthly. They are entirely handmade, and they all fit within the palm of the hand, so they vary in size. I've got it. They're small. They're all small. And they are sent through the post, slow mail, to a list of subscribers every month. They are a celebration of the small and near invisible. They are an archive of incongruities, of gestures and poetic collisions that illuminate and transform our reality. And they are all captured through photography and rendered as these little zines. This is a selection of them. Oops, sorry. I guess this project has its roots in my experience as an analog photographer. I studied photography and worked for a very long time in darkrooms, developing my own work. And I think the thing I really loved about photography was the slippage, the moment between taking the picture and developing it, this moment in between where you have time to forget almost about that encounter. You forget about the image you took. And then when you developed your work and you laid the piece of paper inside the tray, almost this sort of alchemical, I saw the word alchemy, you used it, Ruth, but this alchemical process of like transforming light into fibers, basically. I remember seeing the image reemerge in the trays, and it was like taking the picture again. This moment was the excitement of the encounter just through the process of developing. And mainly because of need, I started taking digital photography after graduating, and after I started working as a commercial filmmaker and photographer. I started using the digital medium, and although it's a different language, I'm not against it, but I did miss the analog process. I missed touching the light, I missed touching the fibers, and also what I missed was the selection that you had to make as a photographer when you were working on film, because you had limited amounts of shots. You would go on a trip, you would go on a walk, and you only had 3 films and those amount of photographs. Whereas now with digital photography, you can take hundreds and thousands of photographs. And I got to a point where I realized I hadn't actually looked at any of these pictures in a long time. There were things I was gathering, and the process of taking the picture has a role in itself. Taking the picture marks something. It kind of, as you say, captures something in your head and your sensibility, and you remember it somehow. But I really did miss the archive aspect of it. I missed the tactile. I missed the box with the photographs inside of it that I could leaf through, and that could physically bring me back to a moment. And so I guess this project is born out of that desire to reconnect with the medium of photography as a ritual and as a way of conjuring reality into matter, basically, and how to reemerge out of this immaterial world. So basically what I started doing was selecting. I would go sort of month by month through my digital archive, and I would decide on a theme, and often they were things lifted from my experiences, sort of autobiographical, and they related to the specific months. But sometimes they were just an inkling or an instinct, a word that emerged from a book I read or something. So I would have a theme, and I would construct. I mean, I should speak in the present because it's an ongoing project. I construct a little book around this theme, and so basically now in the 6th year, I have an archive of my last 6 years, 1 per month, and each one is either 1 image or 10 images, and they're very, very, very sort of accurate, careful selection. And it's a way of distilling a month into a very small book, essentially. As far as the Eye Can Travel is an investigation into the medium of photography and its power to capture and translate a moment that is transient, and alongside with that moment, the epiphany that comes with that spark that happens when you encounter something that really touches you. It is an attempt to re-engage with the act of looking as a radical form of commitment. Each book is like a precious bottle of perfume. It's a distillation of an experience, of a time, of a moment, of a space, of a person. And it is the product of a patient, generous, and hopeful form of engagement with the world. This is something that is also very important to my work as a filmmaker. My background is in animation as well. So time and the time to engage with things properly and with care is very central to all the work that I do. And often when you take a picture, it happens so quickly that you sort of, a lot of these things happen subconsciously, but it's quite interesting to find a process in which you can then unravel this moment of encounter. This book here is the first one I did, although it's not issue number 1. This man over here was the owner of a Botanica in East Harlem. A Botanica is they're shops in East Harlem that were created by the Puerto Rican diaspora to provide materials that were needed for their syncretic religion when they arrived in America. So they are like centers of themselves. They're centers of magic. You know, you can find potions and lotions and all kinds of ointments and cures. And Jorge became a really good friend of mine, and I kept visiting him for years every time I went to New York. And his shop was full of these little bottles. The labels were drawn by his father in the early 20th century. And for a long time, we became friends, and I wanted to do something to mark this really significant encounter I had in my life. And I couldn't come up with anything. And then one day I got a phone call to tell me that he had died suddenly. And I had taken these pictures the last time I saw him, and I felt the urge to sort of just print them, make them physical, bring them back in the world of physicality, and make a little book. And shortly after I made this little book, before the whole thing started as a monthly project, I traveled back to New York, and I met his daughter and his wife in the shop where he used to sit. And I brought them a little book. I brought them a book as a gift, and they opened the book up. And this is the centerfold of the book over here. And this is the table where he used to sit. And so they opened the book at the centerfold, and they placed the book on this very same table. And at that point, I really understood the essence of photography and of the whole project. It was really, the book was returned to where it emerged from. And it made absolute sense for me to continue this project as a way to basically to map my way through my own life and my own world, basically. The zines are a sort of relic of particular places and people. They are a tangible translation of uncanny feelings, experiences so small, almost like invisible, but so profoundly transforming that they deserve their own memento. And this, for example, I was driving through a motorway in the south of Italy, where I come from, and I literally looked to the right. I was going to pick up someone at the airport, and I saw this over here, lying in the middle of this very tall grass on the side of the motorway. And I asked my friend to park, and I just kind of scrambled into the, bushes. And I realized that there was this roadside cemetery of these papier-mâché floats right by a train track, between the train track and the motorway. And they were these incredibly magical things. There was a whale broken in half, and this Pegasus with a carriage and enormous hands. And they were all scattered in this dry summer landscape. And it was tantamount to stepping into a fairy tale for me. And these breaches into the world are what make my life what it is. And I really decided that I needed to find a way to mark them and remember them and take them back with me somehow, in a way that didn't remove from the experience. So I didn't want to, take that float away from where it was, but I wanted to celebrate it for what it adds to the world. It's a real celebration. Another example is this was in Coney Island again. I was walking there one day. I was sitting on the beach one day, and there was this man bobbing up and down in the ocean. And he walked out of the ocean. I could only see his head, and just he came closer and closer. And as he stepped out of the ocean, he literally walked out of the water carrying a plastic bag full of ocean, which he probably took home to bathe in. And I managed to snap this photograph with my phone, and he just walked back to his tenement block. And one of the reasons why I studied fine art and photography. And one thing I never wanted to do was exhibit my photographs framed on a wall. It never made sense to me, partly because I like the editing process. So the book also allows me to walk through a set of images and unravel the narrative, also in the spaces between the images. So it's quite important for me to have several images together, but also because there are some things that you need to keep close and that are secret and precious and need to be held, like a moment like this one. And I couldn't think of a better format to do that in than a book like this. Digital photography transformed my way of taking pictures, and it sort of became almost like an uncontainable sort of deluge of images. But the process of selecting the images and editing them and creating these flows allowed me to make things accessible again and permanent. It also emphasized the role of editing as a tool. Themes emerge also from serendipitous juxtapositions of images. So I may print a couple of images and side by side, they may speak to me. This is called portals, and it is self-explanatory. And the zines, in this sense, become almost like runes. They have a divinatory aspect to it. You know, by revisiting the photographs in retrospect and putting them next to one another, I almost discover things for the first time again. The same goes for the ones that celebrate people. You know, this man, I met him for about 5 minutes. He's a wonderful homeless man in Washington Square Park in New York, and I never saw him again, but he is one of the most significant faces in my life, just because he lives in this photograph in an issue of my zine. And this again, this is a man still in New York. Sorry, I seem to have a lot of New York ones. Who he's an 85-year-old street poet, and he paints and he paints mountainsides on blocks. And what he does is so ephemeral that I thought that giving him a home inside a book is what I really wanted to do with him. I would like to read a little something that my friend Kate, who's actually with us today, who's not actually, she lives in Vermont, in California, but is actually in Vermont at the moment, hence why it's 10 a.m. at hers. She wrote something about these zines. She's a pilgrim and a professor of theology and art, and she wrote something about the zines from the angle of pilgrimage, and I would like to read this just because it illuminates one other aspect of them. Ambrosio emphasizes the collective subconscious at work in what she sees as universal re-enchantment of artistic production, and draws on a diversity of sources and inspirations, including Blake and also the work of Czech new surrealist Jan Schwankmajer. Her love of charged architectures and spaces of ritual recalls a childhood immersed in the deeply Catholic culture of Calabria, Naples, and Rome. The popular piety in those places is one of tactility and expression, a religious culture saturated with devotional paraphernalia. It is not unusual for the faithful to press a prayer card to the relic of a saint to create a contact relic that is believed to carry a trace of a blessing of the holy body. Like these vernacular relics, Ambrosio sees the zines as conduits of spirit from interior spaces, landscapes, and objects. She has described them as handmade talismans, amulets, and portals inside which the captured images are given to the paper and then transformed into charged objects. Like the contact relics made by Calabrian grandmothers, there is an aspect of touch at every step of the way in the production of As Far as the Eye Can Travel. The touch of light as the landscape is captured, the touch of silver nitrate as the image is fixed, the touch of ink on paper. Her project is both an archive of landscapes and spaces and an invitation to a voyage. No boots required. And when I read this, of course, you know, as it often is the case, you discover new aspects of your work. And I realized that indeed my background, my identity as a Southern Italian person has a great deal of impact in the way in which I engage with tactile things. Sorry, my daughter is here. So this is a couple of things I did in Naples, objects of faith that I then translate directly into my zines. And looking back to the last 6 years of zines, they now appear to me as a rich tapestry of mysterious stories that read like the chapters of an enchanted narrative I can barely remember having lived through, but that somehow I have managed to save. You know, some of the titles read, you know, Gods and Monsters, The Orchard, Night Haunt, I'm in the City, Agents of My Faith, Ex Voto, Robert Anton, The Writings on the Wall, The Sea. Similar to the great photographer Jacques-Henri Lartigue, I think of this photographic project as a kind of taxidermy of the soul. Photography and the printed matter together can make us see and touch the world again, dispelling our feelings of loss and loneliness at the thought of a distant, removed and alienating reality. We can watch it all bloom again, an image, a single seed that yields endless stories and invites you to contribute to the never-ending journey. These books are handmade talismans, amulets, and portals. The captured images are given to the paper, transformed into charged objects that assist in an act of conjuring. They offer a way to challenge mainstream narratives, suggesting that meaningful and transformative events happen often unnoticed, and that through the act of paying attention to what is seemingly marginal, real change and revelation can occur. They are an act of commitment to the mystery of presence, a search for continuity within the cracks and the margins, seeing as a revolutionary act of resistance. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And thank you for sharing it all with us and for managing so smoothly when your lovely little one turned up. You've clearly had some practice. I would agree completely about analog photography. It's why I still use it. I also really enjoy the links between your zines and Ruth's bowls, even though on the surface you could look at the two pieces of work and see no similarities at all. There's actually a beautiful link between the two. So that's wonderful. You've also got lots of lovely comments flying past in the chat. As I said earlier, we will save all the questions for when we've had all of the talks. So our last talk of the day is from Sophie and is Drawing as Fundament, Drawing as a Bridge. And I am going to be sharing Sophie's PowerPoint with you all while she delivers her talk.
Can everyone hear me?
Hopefully that will work. And if Sophie unmutes herself.
I have unmuted. Can you hear me?
Brilliant. I shall mute myself so that I'm not, you don't hear noises from my...
So we're at the wrong end of it. Can we go back to the beginning?
Wonderful. Sophie, begin whenever you would like.
Rosie, can you start at the beginning?
Yep, we're somehow at the end. Well spotted. Okay, let me just do that and then mute my...
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's just fantastic to be here, and thank you to Rosie and to everyone at Turn the Page for organising this symposium. I was going to be doing this in person at the fair last year, and it was going to be a background discussion leading into a workshop which I was going to offer to people to actually go out and try walking and drawing. And
and walk and draw is really fundamental to my practice. Well, a bit of background, I suppose, about me is I'm a British Australian, and I've been living in Winchester in southern England for the past 16, 17, 18 years. And my practice spans photography, drawing, printmaking, and artist books. I suppose, and then curating is also a big part of my formal background. And in recent years, I've allowed my art practice to dominate my curating, and drawing has been absolutely fundamental, especially in this past year. I think it's been the sort of simplest thing for me to do. And so today, I suppose I'm wanting to sorry, I'm not going to so I'm just finding my place. Yeah, so last year, Ambrosi put together all sorts of presentations online, and for that, I offered a brief do-it-yourself walk and draw prompt. And so I'm not going to really talk about that so much today, but if for anyone who is interested, you can get in touch with me later, or if you go to my website, there's a link there to a wonderful article by the artist Andrea Butler, who has become a friend, and she and I originally really met over our interest in walking and drawing, and she's put together a wonderful article, so I really suggest that you have a look at that. I'll be also looking at her work a bit later in this presentation. Rosie, could we turn the page, please? So this is really a bit of a background to my artist book practice. And you'll see, and I'm sorry the images are not, I'm just looking, they're a bit blurry, but hopefully you'll be able to sort of make them out. So in the top we have one, this one was called The Onion, and it's a very small book, very handmade, and it's part of a series called Backstory. And this one on the front of it was really playing with the image of an onion, and on the back there was a story of Christine de Pizan, who was the first woman to make a living from writing books in Europe. And one of the things that I was going to do if I had been presenting in Norwich was to be going to the place where Julian of Norwich lived in her as an anchorite in her anchorage cell, which and this was already before COVID. I was very interested in this extraordinary way of living, and so Julian of Norwich, which some of you will know, some of you may even know of the anchorage cell that she lived in, and so she was the first writer a female writer in the English language. And so the next book in that series was going to be called, or will be, I hope I will get to do it next year, will be called The Nut, because when you go to visit her cell, you're given a chestnut, and that was what she apparently gave to all the pilgrims who came to seek her counsel in, I think it was the 14th century. And so that's one little ongoing series. Then if you, on the top right, there's various notebooks that I've made, and then on the furthest top right is a series called Walking with White. And this was a series that I did probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, where I married photography and drawing. And why that project is significant to me is that it was really the first time that I consciously started my walk and draw practice, drawing in sketchbook notebooks and drawing as I walked along. The bottom left, this is some of my movement photography. And I think that part of my walking and drawing practice really came out of my photography, where I was using a lot of in-camera movement, which came out of really the shift from analog to digital allowed me to really experiment with that, that kind of image capture. Also on the bottom left are some etchings, and these are where I have inked up the plate and then gone outside with the plates and drawn into the plates. So they are very directly walk and draw images, and there were 3 of them, and they're all done in one sequence and in the one place. On the bottom right is also some movement photography, in camera movement, and these ones referenced music, but what I've done there is really present them as a folio. And then on the bottom right again is a bit like the top left, just some very simple, very direct making of little notebooks, and those ones were where I was drawing at my table. So very much this contrast of my outside, very movement focused, and walking and drawing in this very rapid mark making and blind contour drawing, really not looking at what I'm drawing in my sketchbooks, but really looking at the world around me. Can we move to the next slide, please? These are some more recent artist book projects. So the top line is the front, middle, and back of a commission that I just did earlier this year, and it was a response to a poem. And I made the woven drawing, which is another part of my drawing practice that I do at home. And this came out of walk and draw, which I have on the sleeve of the cover. You can see some of the process, and so you can see some of the drawings there that I've made, and that actually go into the woven drawing, which was in the middle, and it was the actual drawing, the actual weaving, not a photograph. So the sleeve just really described the process, which did involve walk and draw. And then the bottom, this is another poetry collaboration, and this was they were not really zines, but a sort of pamphlet. And this was a lovely collaboration with a poet. And he, well, we worked actually for we've actually worked on it. We've collaborated on a few projects. His name is Stephen Boyce, and it's just a lovely dialogue which we continue. And he's just amazing at, I'll send him some images and he'll just write poems, and then I'll create images from other poems, and it's this dialogue that goes backwards and forwards. And so, I mean, if I had more time, I would probably read a poem or two, but hopefully you can get a sense of that from those photos. But sorry, it's not very clear. Next slide, please. So this is really the fundament of my walk and draw practice. So walking out in the landscape. So these are, I think all these images are from last year, or no, actually a couple of years, but mostly from last year. And so the top left was actually drawing sideways, and this was really prompted by a passage from Nan Shepherd's The Living Mountain, where she, and it's a wonderful book, if anyone has read it, I don't know, but it's fantastic. And she looks at the view from this mountaintop upside down, looking between her legs, you know, and it's just such a sort of mad but wonderful thing to do. And I couldn't really draw doing that, but I could draw looking sideways. And when I was in this really wide open landscape, it kind of, the landscape sort of demanded that of the drawing if I wanted to draw in a vertical sketchbook, which is my very much my go-to or fallback. A couple of these images also were part of a walk and draw dialogue or virtual dialogue with another artist in America called Mayor Haggerty, and we arranged to walk and draw at the same time. So we were both walking and drawing. We weren't speaking, but we were walking at the same time in different parts of the world. And then we went back, she made work, I finished off some more work, and then we exchanged things in a mail art project, which continues. We're doing more currently, actually. In the center there is an image of a holloway. And that was a project last year. There's a holloway not far out from me in a forest. And I did a lot of work for a project, which was a curated project that brought together lots of walking artists from all around the world. It was put together by Kimball Bumstead, and for that one, I did also a what I call a spatial drawing, and I haven't got that because it's film based. I think there is an image later, but that is on my Instagram feed, or I think there's a link to it on my website as well. So this is really just drawing day, night. I think the bottom two were actually travels in Australia. So just really taking my sketchbooks wherever I'm going, and drawing either in a more figurative way or in just a very abstract mark making, collecting lines, blind drawing as I walk along, and it ends up being a very abstract composition. Next slide, please, Rosie. So these are the sort of piles of sketchbooks which I would be potentially showing if we were all together in Norwich. Obviously, well, not perhaps obviously, but I do write notebooks as well. So the sketchbooks are really my visual diaries, and I have notebooks which might end up having some drawings in them, but usually they're diagrammatic. And lots of books. And I suppose what I wanted to point out here was just in the top left, there's a small sketchbook on the top, and that was one of the drawings from my zigzag drawings of Walking with White series. And so when I started, I was just using smaller sketchbooks and just a simple push pencil, and that was all. And I did that for really a couple of years, and then I gradually worked into colour, probably maybe 2 or 3 years ago now. Next slide, please. And yeah, so on the right there, that's a still from the film, and it's a kind of virtual drawing program, and it's lovely. It's very immersive and wonderful to, well, it's really fun to make, and it's just quite special to walk through a drawing. And if you can see just in the centre, that little white space is the end of the holloway. So it's this really very atmospheric, dark, hollow, liminal space. And on the left are various concertina drawings where, as well as my sketchbooks, I have also in the past year been taking out either folded or sort of map-shaped pieces of paper, so that I can draw in a different way to the sketchbook, so that, you know, you can expand it, you can fold it. It's more of an artist book form, but just very accessible. Next slide, please. So here on the top is work by Andrea Butler, and the left image is one of her sketchbooks where she is walking and drawing. And on the right is a concertina drawing, a concertina artist book that she's made more recently. And it's just been so rewarding to have the dialogue that I've had with her. It's just been fantastic. And we also have collaborated on a mail art project. But it's just to have this dialogue on drawing and walking particularly it's just hugely valuable. On the bottom is a series of images from a workshop that I ran with a family. So there were children, teenagers, and adults, and it was the first time any of them had done it. And I think the children were perhaps a little bit skeptical, but you know, they did it. The adults loved it, and you know, we're planning more. Next slide, please. So this is really urban spaces, nighttime spaces, forests, parks. There's the snowy picture is on Camino. That was I did part of the Camino de France, walking from France into Spain about 2 years ago, and it was yeah, there were all sorts of things that I think came out as a result of that, but I think what it really did triggered for me was this whole idea of pilgrimage. And one of the things, if you're really doing it properly, is to just literally walk out your door, you know, not to fly off somewhere and start in a foreign country, but to actually walk out your own door and walk. And I think that, you know, getting back to the theme of today, this idea of the everyday and just the simple pleasures that can be found right on our doorsteps, you know. And I think that for me, the most mysterious drawings, my abstract drawings, are done closest to home. You know, I think if I'm away in a more stimulating place, I'm so distracted by where I am, and I think that where I'm in a more familiar place, I think that I can access more this inner dialogue. And so for me, the abstract drawings are the most interesting. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so on the left was an exhibition that I did in 2016, and that was a collaborative project with a poet, an academic theorist, and a musician. And I've just really included that because it was an exhibition that was really was to do with negative capability, but also an archaeological dig that was run by the University of Winchester, and it's really, and I'm still working with with that group of people to produce an artist book of some sort to just really mark the project that we did together. But it is really interesting. I mean, these are graves, and even though these people, it was an excavation of a leper hospital, and these people died almost, in some cases they were probably close to 1,000 years old. The remains that were being uncovered and that I was drawing and photographing. And so it becomes really quite challenging to how do you present these stories with reverence to these individuals, even though, it's sort of so distant in the distant past. But so this was an installation that I did in the centre where I actually opened up my sketchbooks and displayed them as an installation. And I mean, it was really effective. And it also, I think at that point I was still very focused on photography, and since that exhibition my shift has been more towards drawing. And the top right here, this was the Walking with White. This was the project that I was showing you before as well, on the zigzag in this Gilbert White, who was the father of ecology, who his zigzag is actually cut into the hillside just near Petersfield in Hampshire. And there I was really drawing, very observational drawing. I mean, it's just a quick sketch, very gestural, but it's still very observational. And then the direct photograph I took at the same time that I drew. But I found that way of working was just too documentational. I couldn't work like that. There was not enough freedom in it. But it was again, it's a project that I want to go back to. Next slide, please. So this is bringing me up to drawing that I've been really doing just in the past month or so. And this was really a sort of revelationary way of drawing, where I could draw at home, especially when the weather was bad, because I can't draw when it's raining. And so really with this, I was going through my sketchbooks, and if there was a drawing that I was really, just unhappy with, an unsuccessful drawing, I was erasing it, but because it's color pencil and it doesn't erase properly, so you're left with these traces. And then I was drawing back into the lines, and so it's a very, very different way of drawing, but it allowed me to still retain something of the gesture and the feeling of the drawing outside, and but taking it somewhere else again, and quite a mysterious place, I think. Next slide, please, Rosie. And again, these are the same. This is the same technique. So walking drawings that have been less successful, that I've erased, and then I've drawn back into them at home in a more delicate, more rendered, calmer, quieter way of drawing, and more intuitively. This fishing basket was a basket that I remembered from that my sister had when I was about 12, and it just sort of was stuck in my head. Anyway, or something in the drawing triggered this memory. Next slide, please. And the drawing on the left was just walking up the street near where I live, and but I wasn't really, the drawing didn't speak to me, and so I erased that one, and then I worked back into it in quite a loose way. And then on the right, this one, again, this recycled drawing, and just responding to the traces that were left behind, and then it really just becoming something else. These ones are a bit more figurative, but still very sort of whimsical, and just completely from just out of my head, and just working very intuitively. You know, some things I just don't even, like this blue thing on the, I don't even know what it is. Anyway, next slide, please. And so this brings me to the end of my talk. So this project of these two drawings, which I made at the same time that I did the first two pieces at the beginning, and so it's just a very simple one fold on each piece of paper, and then folding into each other. And the image on the left was, well, they were both just very intuitively drawn. So they were both drawing, they came out of the recycled drawings, but it was without the underlying drawing. So this is just a fresh, clean sheet of paper. And I suppose where I'm getting to here really is that kind of going this full cycle where by using the book form, I think that it's taken my drawing back to a place where I can get something exciting that has arisen from this combination of thinking about the book form, and through the process I have come to through my walk and draw, and yet then they're drawings that I have done at home, sitting at my desk with a blank piece of paper, and just drawing intuitively. But they do very much reference Aboriginal art, and the one on the left is very much reminding me of an Aboriginal artist called Emily Kingware, and the ones on the right remind me of the Aboriginal bark paint, traditional bark paintings, and probably because I'm missing Australia a bit, but also what was really interesting was that I found a sketchbook which I have here, which I have the whole, this is from 2019, and the whole sketchbook is these kinds of wing-shaped drawings, and it's just so weird to find that I feel like I've resolved what I spent a whole sketchbook working on, you know, 3 years later. Anyway, it's weird how that happens. And I just wanted to, or if we go to the next slide, I think that's the end really, but I just also wanted to mention, because I didn't at the start, was that the first work was actually called The Same River Twice, and this is from Ruth's quote, and it was very much this phenomenology of walking upstream, and the Heraclitus quote of no man walks in the same river twice, and he's not the same man. And so it was just really wonderful to find that you've been working on the same ideas, but in such different way, with such different results. And Chiara, also, when you were talking about the mystery, I think that's really important to me. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sophie. That was fantastic. I really hope, as I'm sure many of you do, that Turn the Page will return physically next year, and that we will have the chance to go on one of Sophie's walk and draw workshops. I know I would enjoy that. I really hope that everyone else is as inspired as I have been. I don't know about all of you, but I've been struggling slightly to make work during lockdown, and having 3 people come and show the ways of making work from stepping out of your front door and from looking at your life and sort of slowing down and embracing the process of art to help us take inspiration from our everyday lives has been wonderful. I'm going to open this to questions from the chat. So if anyone's got a question, so we've got on here, walk and draw, is it an emotional response to what you're seeing or an interpretation? That's for you, Sophie.
For me, it's both. So, but I tend to draw into, it tends to look like 2 different things. So there'll be my more, or I tend to bunch them, group them into my more figurative and then my more abstract. But even the abstract ones, I'm drawing things that I see. I'm drawing that, it's like blind drawing. I'm collecting lines. So there might be a shadow, or there might be a piece of clothing that someone's wearing, or, a dog's tail, or, it might be just these details, or a leaf, or a tree, or just all these things that it's like my rapid eye movement. So it's like I'm trying to just literally get it down as I see it. So it's very quick, very intuitive. Whereas and those are the ones that appeal to me the most. But the more figurative ones, where you can really see more of where it is, and that is a house or a street or a road or a forest. Those ones are. I will probably slow down, or sometimes I might even retrace my steps and walk that section again to really capture it. Those ones, sometimes I just want to draw like that, or sometimes I just want to capture what that kind of perspective. So for me, the page and this shape is sort of Giotto's 1 point perspective. That's very important to me. But yes, so to answer your question, I'm working both ways, and I really just mix it up as I feel like it.
Thank you, Sophie. Does anyone else want to put any questions into the chat for us? And while you're doing that, if any of our speakers have questions for each other, things that might have cropped up, or anything they want to add from their own talk now that they've listened to other people. We do have one from the chat for Chiara. Is the zine size dictating, i.e. do you like crop or choose the pictures based on the size, or do you resize them to fit them?
I never crop the images, so it's the way I decide which size it's going to be is really to do with the actual content matter, or even just the format. But I often work with sort of I take picture with my camera or with my iPhone. Occasionally I take Polaroids, so some of them are square, and that's the only time in the only instances in when I'm sort of when I'm following sort of the size, what there is a massive change, let's say. But one of the things I forgot to say is that when I talked about the man who ran the Botanic and his little bottles, one of the things that got me thinking is that the bottles themselves had these labels, and the labels were a story unto themselves. I mean, it wasn't just the content, but it was the journey of the drawings and the narrative within them. And the first thing I thought was like, wow, this place reminds me of the Book Art Bookshop. Each bottle carries, you know, it's invested with so much history, potential, hope, sort of hoping to the present, you know, into what hope can do. And so the actual book emerged from this sort of realization that the book in itself holds so much, and so it can contain a lot more than just one image on a wall. And that's how I got to it. But yeah, I only use the original pictures. I never crop, and the size just depends on what fits better.
And we have another one for you, Chiara, from Jules, saying that she thought it was interesting that the gallery doesn't seem an appropriate place for your work. And have you ever considered other formats outside of the book as a way of displaying your?
So when I was in college, I was experimenting many years ago. I was experimenting with not framing my photographs, and I was actually hanging them on walls. So the first I did have exhibitions in London. The exhibitions I had were mainly very long unraveling sort of collages of photos sort of pinned to the wall, and so I experimented in space. It's not that the gallery setting isn't right, it's just that the actual framed picture on its own doesn't quite work for me. So I like the juxtaposition between images. That's perhaps more correct. And so that's why I started working in film. That sort of unraveling of my pictures in space led me to working in film, because film became sort of the obvious place where I could work with images, framings, and sort of the temporal quality of an image next to another. So film and space, but not as a wall where you hang framed things, but rather as a place where you experiment, which is like an expanded book. But I really like the book. I like the fact that you hold them, and that there's someone, Tanya, who subscribes to my zine, wrote they are secret. And that's true. You know, you receive them in an envelope in the post, and the whole process of like engagement with a book. I'm a big book person. I grew up with books. So my privileged relationship, one-to-one relationship with the book is really special. And I think that my relationship to photography is also like that. It's very intimate. It's almost sacred. You know, you're lifting something out of the world that is sacred because it's alive, it's happened, it's there. And I like this intimacy.
Wonderful, thank you. Jules says thank you as well. So we have another one here from Hazel, who says that she wants to get making. Your talks have all been so inspiring. So she wanted to know a little from all of you about how you actually go about sticking your books together, making them the sort of practical side. So that's for all three of you, really. Any hints and tips to how you make your books? Don't know who wants to answer that or field that, but any suggestions?
Well,
Ruth, we haven't heard.
Just to say that I've experimented with lots of different. I just got a book, and I found out how to make books from a book. I just got a book and tried lots of different things, and in the end, I came back to the simple concertina because I was thinking about time. But I think you could do it in all sorts of ways, and I just made it up as I went along to suit what I was doing. So I haven't any tips really.
I think making it up as you go along is a tip, personally.
I make a lot of small sort of maquettes. So first of all, I'll be drawing diagrams of it, and then I'll mock it up. and then I might even, there'll probably be a few versions before I get to the final one.
Fantastic.
Chiara, does that happen for you with your?
Yeah,
CFS?
I make maquettes just for the layout because it's much easier to look at them, and then often I do just some printouts, but often it's just I lay them out digitally after I've done a little maquette, and then I print them at home on my digital printer. But it's kind of fiddly because they're very small, and so there can be no slippage in the printer, so it can be extremely fiddly printing both sides. But I experiment also with papers, so whatever I manage to get through my printer I work with. So I work with different papers and how photography looks on different substances.
That sounds, anything that will go through the printer sounds like a very familiar process. My printer doesn't like me very much, the things I've asked it to print on over these years. So one of the things I was interested by was that all three of you mentioned that sort of coming to the book form has changed the way that you have or formed the projects that you've all been talking about. So realizing in Chiara's case that they made sense in these little zines and that you could access your digital photo archives in a way that anchored them, and Ruth's sort of expanded understanding of the book and that physical process of making and the little book bowls. And so I was interested in, Chiara said she's always been surrounded by books. Is that true for you, Sophie and Ruth? Like, was that something that was new to you, you stumbled upon and thought, oh, actually my work fits into book art? Or was it completely obvious that it was going to go that way because you've always loved books? I'm always interested in where book artists start their journey.
Well, one of my most prized books is one that is an altered book that I made when I was probably less than 2, which I still own and absolutely love. And it's just amazing because it's like, it's before that, it's a child who's before they've learnt how to draw. And so it's just this response to a story. And I can see myself in it trying to make sense of my life at that time, because we were living in London, and my family were moving back to Australia. And I'm sure that in this book, I'm grappling with making sense of my life. Aged, I think about 2, maybe less. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, I've also made books since I was very small, and still have books I made. Drew, This Is My House, This Is Me, when I was about 4. And I have been surrounded by books and still love books. And I would quite like to make a really big book that you could walk through, but it would be a bit inconvenient.
Don't let the inconvenience stop you. I want to walk through a book.
Anson Kiefer did one. Did you see it in his exhibition at the Royal Academy, his retrospective a few years back? He had this massive sort of unraveled pages of a book. His background is in artist book as well.
Yes.
And he made a massive, there's sheets from a book that you could walk through. You should have a look. It's not, I think you could do better probably. But the work is amazing, but as a book, it didn't quite work. But
in my mind, as you said, Sophie, things stay in your mind and then come back and you don't quite realize they were there. So yeah, it might be. I did like that exhibition.
But Ruth, the work that you showed of the almost like canvases hanging, your installations out on these walks, it was very much like what you're saying.
Yeah.
We have another question here for Ruth saying, I appreciate the inclusion of text and words, the archival material, all the layers in the paper mache. Is the layering random, and then you think about how to use it, or do you try to intervene to place order, make the shapes that you want?
It's not exactly layered in terms of pieces being ripped off and stuck on. I always make a pulp. And I feel that it's cheating if I deliberately make pieces of text appear where I might want them to appear. But it's not random in that the text is something that's relevant that I've chosen. So, for example, I've been doing some stuff about flood stories and made a piece that's based on after the flood. And I used the Bibles that I had and took out the Noah story and used that material, but I pulped it so the words come out randomly.
Excellent. Does anyone else have any questions they want to throw into the chat? Or do any of my wonderful and generous speakers who have donated their time today have any questions for each other or anything else they'd want to mention today? Nothing is popping up. We're just getting lots of thank yous and amazings. I'm going to try and save the chat because that's got a couple of interesting links and things that people have thrown out with giant books and things of that sort. So I will try and do that as well as have the recording. I'm not sure that I know how, but hopefully Zoom will be intuitive enough. I want to, oh, Chiara. You're muted, my dear.
Hi, sorry. Ruth, I just wanted to ask you, I was very touched when you said that you've started returning things out, like as a form of like poetic rewilding. Like, do you do it? Like, do you record? I mean, I know you said you draw the objects, but do you record somehow what happens to you when you place these objects back? Because of course you're taking them back, but they're now accrued this like new sediment of like the shared life with you somehow, that poetic quality. Do you record this act of almost like planting them back into the world? You're almost like making a garden that was there to begin with, but has now a completely different meaning.
I take a photograph of them when I put them back where they came from, but they don't necessarily, there's a lot of problems. Like if I've picked up a glass bottle off the beach, is it really okay to put it back on the beach? And if it's seeds from Spain, is it really okay to put them back here? So, but I take a photograph.
It reminds me, I've been mudlarking during the lockdown, and a lot of the mudlarkers take stuff back just when they have too much of something, they give it back to the river. And it happened to me once that I picked up a shard of pottery and I happened to stand next to someone who had put it back about a month before. And that was such a wonderful experience. Like this idea that something that comes to you and you're experiencing it as something just new and fresh and natural and untouched has actually been brought back. It's that kind of meaning that another form of sediment is just so powerful, actually.
I always think it would be amazing if somebody found one of the things. I've got some giant shells and I wondered about putting them back that don't come from here, and I wondered about putting them on the beach and then lying in wait to see who found them.
Be interesting waiting to watch. That's absolutely wonderful. I want to thank everybody that's asked questions in the chat and everybody that's come and listened and made such wonderful comments in the chat. I'm really glad it's been as inspiring for you as the Turn the Page team and I were hoping it was going to be. And thank you so much to Chiara and Ruth and Sophie for donating their time to us and coming and inspiring us all. That's wonderful. I really hope, I said at the beginning, but I don't think everybody was here then. I really hope everyone is enjoying the travel through history on the Turn the Page and monthly anthology celebrations, both on the Turn the Page website and on our social media feeds. I know I've been enjoying going back to all the fairs that I attended as an exhibitor and being reminded of all the incredible artists who inspire me with our yearly visits to Turn the Page, and it's making me very excited to return there in person next year. If anybody had any questions that come to them later that they wish they'd had a chance to ask, or any comments, they're very welcome to email me. You should have that email address from signing on to this event on Eventbrite, but it's ttpsymposium@gmail.com. And you're very welcome to do that, and I can forward your questions if it was a question for the artist or something that you didn't have a chance to ask now. And I hope that you will all join us in September, at the end of September, when we will have a talk from Kate Bernstein and Dr. Sian Prosser, who is an astrologer that she's been collaborating with from the Royal Astrology Society. So that should be amazing, and I hope you'll all join us for that. The event listing will go up at some point in mid-August. And yeah, just another huge thank you to our speakers. I've had a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. I feel blessed by getting to witness all your pilgrimages. So thank you very much. And I hope everybody is inspired to step out of their front door and make some art in the coming weeks.
Thank you for organising, Rosie. Thank you for organising it.
Thank you, Rosie.
My pleasure. If anybody doesn't know how to get out of here, you just press the little leave button in the bottom right hand corner of your Zoom screens. And I'm gonna not end the meeting immediately so that I can just make sure that the recording is working and see if I can save the chat. So if anybody is hanging around, that's why I haven't closed it. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.